I'm Callista.
And I'm Teresa, and this is Culprit. I think this week we were going to chat about The Other Bennett Sister.
Yeah, we watched that on BritBox. I think it came out pretty recently. Obviously, a Pride and Prejudice adaptation. I think it was based on the book about Elizabeth's sister Mary.
Yeah, I glanced briefly, and it looks like somebody did, wrote a book like in 2000, kind of, reinventing the story. So, and of course, that book was, loosely based on the original. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I thought it was kind of cute. I mean, especially in the beginning, it stuck pretty squarely, like, with the sister stories, close to Jane Austen. But then I appreciated that reimagining of Mary, especially, giving her more autonomy and kind of everything, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. And a bookish character who wants to have a career, even back then, is not maybe a bad thing. Yeah. I mean, I know that's the mom was evil, but yeah. I really liked the aunt and uncle. I just really like because I mean, of course, I liked Lizzie. Is Lizzie the only sister that I liked? Did you like other sisters? I know the one was really horrible. I don't remember her name.
I think that had to have been Kitty.
Okay. Yeah, she was awful. Um, but I mean, I get the time frame it's written in and all that, but I like when there's, like you said, like a reimagining and yeah, that a character actually gets to do more than her proposed lot in life, just marry well. That is her whole, purpose for being. So I liked that. I liked that she got under or out from underneath of her mom's thumb, at least for a while. And, got to go to London. Again, really liked the aunt and uncle. And yeah, I thought it was kind of cute. So
Yeah, and I think I was actually wrong. I think it must have been Lydia because she was married to Wickham, and so that would have been the longest marriage. So I think she was the one who was pregnant. But anyhow, yeah, really liked the aunt and uncle too, and we really appreciated the aunt was Indra Varma, who's one of the hosts of the podcast The Spy Who, and so we really appreciated getting to see her. Obviously, I think we've seen her in Game of Thrones, but putting like a face to the voice.
yeah, I know she's been in a couple other things we've seen too, but, and you picked up on that. Well, I don't know if you saw her name or if you just picked up on her voice. I think you picked up on the voice, didn't you?
No, I saw the name, and then because
Okay.
I saw the name, I was listening really intently. I'm like, "Okay, if I close my eyes, I'm sure I can, like, match the voice."
Yeah, well, good on you. Yeah,
Thanks.
and, yeah, I mean, we both listened to a lot of podcasts, and, The Spy Who is really, really good, and, of course, all the episodes aren't narrated by her, but, she's just got kind of like it's kind of like when you listen to a book, a lot comes from the narrator, a lot comes from the host, and she just kinda has a soothing voice, and I liked that she played, in the show that she played, somebody decent and, not some horrible character that I would then think of when I listen to her.
Yes, definitely.
That's just me. I'm weird about that kind of thing.
No, I mean, I think it's like you really like the narrator, and I like her too, Julia Whalen, and we think of the first thing we heard her in, which I think was, she narrated, Taylor Jenkins Reid's Malibu Rising.
Yeah, which is funny that that's the first one that we read from Taylor Jenkins Reid. I mean, because I think that had been at that point, that was like her most recent. Anyway,
Well, no, that wasn't the first one we read. The first one we read was, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That was the first one we listened to.
you're right. I always forget that. You're right. Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
Going back to what you were saying about the mom, I do think there was like one scene, it's not giving it away, where it kind of explores more how obviously I think if you read the book, seeing the movie with, Keira Knightley and everything, most people are gonna be like, I like the dad better, but he, was better in comparison to the mom, but he wasn't in that sense looking out for their future. So I did appreciate that we got, saying that the reason the mom is so awful is because she's had been under that pressure, even though she's still awful.
yeah, I mean that's true. And it's, oh my God, we have all these daughters, shit, you deal with that. You find you find suitors for them and yeah, I'll be gone. And yeah, you just deal with it all. It's true. So I mean, yeah, when they had their little heart to heart, I think towards the end of the series, yeah, you do get like a little glimpse into why she is the way she is, but she still didn't treat Mary well.
No, definitely not.
You know, it's amazing that she had any self esteem. She was just awful. Anyway,
Yeah, but, it was a little lighter than, some of the dramas we normally watch, but it was, kind of cute, and again, liked Mary's independence, her intelligence, all those kinds of things are always nice to see.
all those. Yeah, it always makes me think when somebody says something like, and these have nothing to do with each other. So, but like Beauty and the Beast, and it's like, oh my God, Belle, like a character that, I mean, we could go into the specifics that doesn't end necessarily like the way I would want, but, oh my God, we have a character that reads, and, that doesn't mean that she has to be ostracized to the basement or, you know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? Yeah. So that's, I know we're putting our, 2026 lens on, those kinds of things. But no, I liked it. And you're right. It was a little lighter. I feel like a lot of things that we watch maybe tend to be a little darker or, don't necessarily have happy endings. So, yeah, I liked it.
yeah. Alright, anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay, on to the episode then. It was 2013, and 75-year-old Isao Kakehi had decided to make the most of his third act by working with a Japanese matchmaking agency. Through the service, he met 67-year-old Chisako. Isao quickly fell in love with the charming widow. Before they had even celebrated their 2-month anniversary, they had gotten married and moved in together to a home in Muko, a city on the southwestern edge of the Kyoto Basin. Soon, the couple was getting ready to ring in the upcoming new year by making rice cakes. Yet, Isao never got the chance to celebrate, because despite his good health, on the evening of December 28th, he fell to the floor of their home after sharing dinner with his new wife. An hour later, he was dead, having become the last of the confirmed victims of the woman who would later be referred to as both the Black Widow and the Poison Lady. Despite her later infamy, not much has been reported about her early life. Born in the Saga prefecture of southwestern Japan, Chisako would spend her career working at a bank and founding a fabric printing company. As for her personal life, in 1969, the then 24-year-old married her first husband. Unlike the relationships to follow, this was a lasting one, and the couple stayed together for 25 years. Their union only ended when Chisako's 54-year-old husband passed away from an unnamed illness in 1994.
Having grieved her first partner, Chisako got on with life by signing up for a dating agency. Through this service, she found love again and remarried. However, tragedy befell her once more when in 2006, her second husband died from a stroke at the age of 69. But Chisako wasn't one to let loss derail her life. And by 2007, the 61-year-old had begun seeing 79-year-old Toshiaki Suehiro. While Chisako was out having lunch with Toshiaki and his children in Kobe, a bustling port city and the capital of Hyogo Prefecture, on December 18th, 2007, she handed him what looked like one of his health supplements. Unaware that Chisako was actually offering him a cyanide capsule, Toshiaki accepted the pill. Not even 15 minutes after they had finished eating, the group was on the street when Toshiaki fell to the ground unconscious.
Emergency responders jumped out of the ambulance to find him gasping for breath. Once he had been rushed to the hospital, doctors worked to prevent him from succumbing to internal asphyxiation. At first glance, his new partner seemed to show an appropriate level of concern by remaining by his side as he fought for his life. But Chisako's actions soon belied her true intent when she told both the emergency responders and Toshiaki's family that her name was Hiraoka, leaving no doubt that her real motivation was looking after herself. Toshiaki pulled through, but he was forever altered by his near death experience. Grappling with incurable higher dysfunction and visual impairment until his death from cancer 18 months later in May 2009.
That's tragic.
It really is. Chisako, though, didn't even wait for him to pass before going back on the hunt. She married again, and her third husband died in 2008 at the age of 75. Back on the market once more, Chisako soon focused her attention on a new man, 71-year-old Masanori Honda. By 2011, Masanori's diabetes had eased to a mild status. He was making the most of his health to visit sports clubs and to pursue a new romantic relationship with Chisako. We don't know exactly how long they were together, but by the end of the year, they had become common law partners and were actively planning a future together. Or, at least, that's what Masanori believed.
In reality, Chisako was actively looking into other options. By January 2012, she was already going on dates with other men, whom she had met through a dating agency. 2 months later, on March 9th, 2012, she and Masanori, who had no idea she had checked out of their relationship, met up at a store before leaving separately. However, it seemed that Chisako had given Masanori a parting gift because around 5 that afternoon, he blacked out during a motorcycle ride in Kaizuka, a city in Osaka Prefecture. Following the crash, he was pronounced dead at the hospital less than 2 hours later. Barely a year after her latest lover's death, Chisako had set her sights on a new target. Although 75-year-old Minoru Hiyoki had contended with a lung cancer relapse and isolation in recent years, by July 2013, his cancer was responding well to radiation therapy, and he had seemingly found love. In the month that followed, Minoru and Chisako frequently stayed the night at each other's places. Minoru even sent Shizaku, who was now his common law partner, an email in which he said that he hoped they would stay together forever. Minoru had no way of knowing that his dreams of forever would be cut short by the very person he wanted to spend it with.
On September 20th, 2013, the couple chose to go out for dinner at a restaurant in Itami, another city in Hyogo Prefecture. Like Toshiaki, Minoru regularly took health supplements. So, Chisako once again handed over a cyanide capsule masquerading as an innocuous pill.
She is rather bold, but I guess she was feeling pretty confident since she hadn't been caught yet.
Definitely. Minoru had hardly finished chewing his last bite before he fell unconscious. By the time the ambulance showed up, he was struggling to breathe. But Chisako told emergency responders not to resuscitate him. She said that Minoru had been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer and that he didn't have any living relatives. Two more lies that ensured she was the one calling the shots.
I mean, it's not like the paramedics can verify if she's telling the truth in an emergency setting.
Unfortunately, not. And less than 2 hours later, Minoru, a father and cancer survivor, was dead. Having gotten away with the murders of Masanori and Minoru, as well as the attempted murder of Toshiaki, Chisako was now cocky and careless enough to wait almost no time at all before selecting her next victim. By November 2013, only 2 months after she killed Minoru, Chisako had married salaryman Isao. However, the honeymoon phase didn't last long. Hardly a month after their nuptials, she started having an affair with another man. But Isao was completely in the dark about Chisako's infidelity. He was excited to enjoy his golden years with his new wife. Via email and other messages, he told her that he hoped they would do their best to enjoy a bright second life and live long.
These poor unsuspecting men just hoping to enjoy their golden years.
I mean, it should be a perfectly reasonable assumption that your new partner isn't plotting to murder you.
I mean, it should be. Tragically, his chance at a new life was cut short on December 28th, when weeks after their wedding, the hardworking businessman went into cardiopulmonary arrest after having dinner with Chisako. Still attempting to hide her Black Widow status, she responded to her fourth and final husband's collapse by calling for an ambulance. Emergency responders hurried to get him to the hospital, but Isao passed away an hour later. While autopsies are generally only conducted in Japan if there's evidence of foul play, Isao's death from a supposed heart attack raised enough eyebrows that a postmortem was performed. The examination uncovered stomach erosion, the cause of which quickly became apparent when fatal amounts of cyanide compounds were found in his stomach, heart, and blood. Although the authorities had initially determined that Chisako's past partners died from natural causes, now that her fourth husband had died in a decidedly unnatural way, the police began looking into the deaths they had previously overlooked.
But if they had any hope of connecting the cases, authorities first had to dig deeper into Chisako's latest crime. They soon learned that she had, once again, exploited her partner's use of health supplements. Only days after Isao's death, investigators discovered empty capsules and health supplement pills inside Chisako's apartment in Osaka, leading them to theorize that she had discarded the contents of the health supplements, then replaced the harmless powder with ground cyanide. Their assumption was confirmed in August 2014 when they found a plastic zipper storage bag that tested positive for cyanide hidden in a plant pot Chisako had dumped at a recycling center near the couple's shared home in Muko. The bag's color and contents indicated that it had been buried for months. Another nail was added to Chisako's coffin when a similar bag was also found in her apartment.
Having determined that Chisako, who had insisted she had no way of getting her hands on cyanide, acquired the poison from a business associate she had made when she was still running her fabric printing company, the police arrested her in Kyoto on suspicion of poisoning Isao in November 2014. The day after she was detained, the police went back to her Osaka apartment and her Muko home with Isao. They not only bagged more capsules, but also medical books and wafers used to wrap powdered medicine. Given Shisako's previous claim that she had just been doomed by fate to witness the deaths of those around her, it took months of interrogations before she finally confessed to using cyanide capsules on Isao as well as Toshiaki, Masanori, and Minoru. Even though she later recanted, authorities managed to get their hands on a blood sample of Masanori's drawn at the time of his death. The traces of cyanide discovered contradicted his earlier cause of death of heart failure, although the police became convinced that the wealthy widow had a hand in the murders of four additional men who died within years of either their marriage or the start of their relationship. Insufficient evidence meant prosecutors only charged her with poisoning Toshiaki, Masanori, Minoru, and Isao.
It was clear why Chisako had chosen to target these men. Toshiaki, Masanori, Minoru, and Isao may have had dissimilar jobs and lived in different cities, but they were all older, single men who brought substantial savings and assets to their new relationships. To limit the time she spent sniffing out a new moneyed mark, Chisako often turned to dating agencies through which she could specify her desire to connect with men who were both well off and childless. That is, without any obvious heirs. Perhaps she added the second criteria after she poisoned Toshiaki, and his children had the audacity to try and follow up with a front row witness.
I mean, she assumed his children wouldn't have questions? I mean, that was awfully naive.
Either naive or brazen in assuming she could wriggle out of answering. Having racked up a considerable debt of 48 million yen, which is around $437,000, Chisako opted out of repaying Toshiaki. Instead, she decided to solve the problem by murdering the lender. Or at least, that was plan A. In February 2008, 2 months after the failed attack, Toshiaki's children received a distressing letter. Chisako had written that she had paid off her debt with another man's inheritance. Toshiaki's children were stunned. They hadn't known that their father had loaned Chisako any money. In fact, they knew very little about the nameless woman their father was dating at the time of his near death experience. When they attempted to ask questions, Chisako refused to say anything about their father's sudden sickness, so they remained as out of the loop about what had happened and what her part in it had been as before.
While the exact amount she stole from each of her victims is unclear, it's estimated that she took around 16 million yen, or $145,000, from Masanori and 1 billion yen, or around 9 million in all, when taking into account the valuables, inheritances, and other assets, such as the substantial life insurance payout she received as the newly named beneficiary of the men she had targeted. Eager to get her hands on her ill gotten gains, Chisako had wasted no time to start the inheritance process after the deaths and had even tried to enter her late lovers' homes to assess all of their assets. Even though she squandered most of the money on bad financial trades, she had taken enough that she could no longer claim she truly needed Isao's money when she murdered him. Chisaku finally admitted her true motive almost 3 years after her arrest. While she stayed silent when her trial first got underway on June 26, 2017, once Chisako was on the witness stand 2 weeks later, the 70-year-old revealed that she had waited for the right moment to kill Isao out of rage over the unfair financial treatment he displayed in offering other women, including his most recent ex, millions of yen while refusing to hand over any to Chisako.
Days later, she claimed not to remember confessing to poisoning Isao. This lapse in memory rather conveniently aligned with her attorney's argument of trying to discredit her testimony due to her mild dementia, with which she had been diagnosed after a court ordered psychiatric examination a year earlier. Although she was determined to be competent to stand trial, her lawyers contended that this meant she struggled to verbalize her ideas, understand others, and remember recent events. Apart from this retracted revelation, Chisako has shared few details about her crimes and has largely refused media requests since her arrest in 2014. Even still, her motive isn't difficult to discern. Having been driven by greed and self interest for years, she ultimately displayed little remorse for exploiting her victims' trust and their desire for a shared future in order to kill them for her own gain. As a result of the intense public interest in the Black Widow case, more than 560 people waited outside the courtroom on November 7th, 2017.
Because of course they did.
People of a spectacle, in the hope that they would be able to watch the conclusion of the 135-day marathon trial, which had ended up becoming the second longest court case since 2009, the year that Japan established a joint judge jury system. Inside, the Kyoto District Court judge ruled that Chisako did not have dementia at the time of the three murders and the attempted murder and robbery of Toshiaki, and sentenced her to death by hanging.
Her defense team immediately appealed their ruling, insisting that her dementia meant she couldn't be held criminally liable. The appeal was first denied by the Osaka High Court in 2019, then by Japan's Supreme Court in June 2021, when Judge Yuko Miyazaki ruled that Chisako's use of matchmaking agencies to connect with various elderly victims who she then poisoned with cyanide after gaining their trust pointed to her murderous intent and necessitated the death penalty. With her death sentence upheld, a now white haired 74-year-old Chisako was sent back to death row, where she focused her attention on securing a retrial in one of the murder cases. Japanese law requires inmates to be executed within 6 months of their sentencing hearing, but because of prolonged appeal attempts, prisoners typically stay on death row for around 15 years. Ultimately, Chisako joined the ranks of prisoners who died on death row before ever reaching their execution date. The 78-year-old was discovered lying in her cell at a detention center in Osaka in December 2024. Although her death was confirmed at a hospital, the cause was not released. That said, Japanese media outlets reported that it could have been due to an undisclosed illness. The press may have given Chisako the Black Widow nickname, which we hardly need to tell you is a reference to the fact that these specific female spiders kill their partners after sex, but they didn't reserve it solely for her.
Over an 8-month period in 2009, fellow Black Widow, 37-year-old Kanai Kijima, murdered 3 men she had met on dating sites. In each case, she drugged them with sleeping pills, then burned charcoal briquettes to poison them with carbon monoxide, which was a common method of suicide in Japan, all to avoid repaying the money they had loaned her. Kanai started off by murdering 53-year-old Takao Terada in his home in Tokyo in January 2009. She then took advantage of her position as home helper for 80-year-old Kenzo Ando to take him out at his home in neighboring Chiba Prefecture in May. She might have thought that she had covered her tracks, but in reality, she was caught on CCTV using Kenzo's cash card to withdraw money, a task she claimed Kenzo had asked her to complete. Her mistakes truly began to catch up with her in August when the body of 41-year-old Yoshiyuki Oide was discovered in the back seat of his rental car in Saitama Prefecture, which is also near Tokyo. There may have been a charcoal burner in the car full of burned briquettes, but the suicide assumption was nonetheless challenged due to the absence of any keys in the ignition. These doubts only grew in response to the post Yoshiyuki had written on his blog not even 24 hours before his death, in which he announced that he would be meeting his fiance's, that is, Kanai's, family later that day. Further fueling the fire of suspicion was the fact that shortly before his untimely passing, Yoshiyuki had transferred 5 million yen to his partner's bank account. The suicide theory was abandoned entirely after Yoshiyuki's autopsy revealed that, in addition to carbon monoxide, his blood had also tested positive for sleeping pills. It seemed that Kanai's work as a nurse had allowed her to obtain several prescriptions for sleeping pills, whereas she hadn't needed any extra credentials to buy the supplies required to induce carbon monoxide poisoning online.
Kanai had developed a pattern of first agreeing to marry a man, then telling him that she needed money to finish her studies before they made it official. It wasn't hard to guess what she actually used this money on. While the mother of five lived in a modest apartment, she took to her blog to flaunt a luxurious lifestyle that saw her driving a red Mercedes to meet her dates at expensive hotels. Although her defense attempted to argue that all the deaths had either been accidents or suicides caused by Kanai leaving them, she was ultimately found guilty of the three murders as well as seven other crimes, such as theft and fraud, and sentenced to death by hanging in 2012. Since her arrest, Kanai has changed her last name to Doi, married twice, and appealed her conviction. However, in April 2017, the Supreme Court rejected her final appeal. Even though both Chisako and Kanai committed romance scams, a method of financial fraud in which the perpetrator enters into a romantic relationship with their target to gain their trust, the majority of these types of scammers don't knock off their victims. Instead, they disappear once they've gotten their hands on the money they were after.
In the early 2020s, Tokyo based fraud victim support group, the Japanese Counseling Organization for Personality Disorder and Marriage Fraud, was dealing with around 100 romance scams a year. Most of their victims were targeted through the marriage consulting companies they had sought out in the hope of matching with a future spouse. And many of them were widows or divorcees without family nearby whose profiles mentioned their sizable salaries or significant financial assets.
No, don't include that in your profile.
I know it shows financial stability, which is definitely a pro when it comes to entering into a serious relationship, but it also puts a massive target on your back. After the requested money had been sent, the perpetrators would keep making demands until they ran their marks dry, leaving some to turn to loan sharks to continue supporting their supposed lovers.
It's so sad.
It really is. Romance scams in Japan were still on the rise in 2025, with the National Police Agency reporting that there were 5,604 cases in which victims lost a total of 55.2 billion yen, making the average per case around 9.87 million yen or more than $60,000. Over 30% of the perpetrators took advantage of matching apps, and more than 20% turned to Instagram.
Older adults are particularly vulnerable due to their perceived financial stability, unfamiliarity, the unfamiliarity with rapid technological advancements and increased isolation. These challenges are all the more apparent in Japan, since it has one of the fastest aging societies in the world, where around 30% of Japanese adults are age 65 or over. The country is contending with both a low birth rate and a decline in multi generational households because of factors like migration and economic necessity, which means many face aging alone. In fact, nearly 20% of seniors live alone. Additionally, thanks to mounting elderly poverty and insufficient elder care infrastructure, the country's seen a rise in kadokushi, or lonely death, defined as a phenomenon in which a person dies without being cared for by anyone and whose body is found after a certain period. In 2024 alone, there were over 70,000 lonely deaths nationwide, with many of them involving those over 65 who had limited access to resources. Yeah, I will now be thinking of lonely deaths for days. Being old sucks.
Truer words. Given this grim reality, is it any wonder that Chisako was able to carry out her murderous scam for years? Toshiaki Suehiro, Masanori Honda, Minoru Hiyoki, and Isao Kakehi were simply looking for companionship in their golden years, hopeful that they could have a brighter future if they had someone to share it with. Instead, Shisako stole multiple lives and millions of yen, and in the process allowed her greed to rob her of her morality.
If she ever had any.
For real. Next time, we'll be discussing the case of Jason Harris.
All the sources we used for this episode are in the show notes below. If you'd like to suggest a case for us to discuss, you can email us at culpritpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us at culpritthepod on Instagram and at culpritpodcast on TikTok. Feel free to leave us a comment, rating, or review to let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your opinions.
See you soon.